I introduced the Achieve framework for thinking about problems that might be a good fit for solving with AI. Now, just because it fits into this framework doesn't mean it's the right type of problem, and we'll follow up on that later. But for now, I want to go through each of these elements because I think they're really useful. And we're going to start off here with the very first one, which is aid human coordination. Now, there are so many types of tasks that we do all day long that require human coordination, and we make mistakes on them all the time. And if you think about how much money is wasted in poor human coordination, you can imagine how much potential there is. If we talk about operational efficiency, things like a lot of people talk about different types of tasks, but so much time, money, effort, headache, unhappiness, other things just comes out of poor human coordination and communication. So let's look at how we can aid human coordination. So I'm going to start off with a simple example here, right? I've taken a bunch of meeting notes. I call it a transcript. That was actually a typo and a mistake on my part. And I say, act as my personal assistant. Read the following meeting transcript and provide me a summary of the key points of discussion, right? Like, one of the things you always had a problem with is, right, if you had a personal assistant or you had enough people looking at things, they might be able to get eyes and be really critical and identify problems, project managers. But it's, imagine being able to have as many sets of eyes as you want, as many different extra eyes as possible that can take a perspective on this. Now notice, I'm using the persona pattern in this. I'm saying act as my personal assistant. And I want you to read these following points and summarize them. So it goes through and it says thread 1, academic workshops at Prestige University. I've taken some of the ideas from a real workshop scheduling problem that was being done where we were trying to create faculty workshops at Vanderbilt to go and help Vanderbilt faculty learn about generative AI. So what I've done here is I've actually taken it, I anonymized it, I had it turn it into different titles, different roles, different email addresses so I could have this discussion. And so it comes out with a transcript. Basically, we have the academic workshops at Prestige University. We've got Daniel Brown and Rima Mistry. It describes who they are. And basically what they say is they proposed a plan to hold a series of training sessions focused on the educational impacts and applications of AI chatbots. And the introduction to AI chatbot and prompt engineering. Now, I changed the titles, I changed the names, I changed subjects and things to make this a little bit more interesting. But the key thing is, and this is changed transcript, this is correct. We're scheduling a series of workshops to look at training Vanderbilt faculty. Well, actually, in this case, University XYZ and Prestige University. Now, there's a couple of different things in here. We have what each person is suggesting or doing. Ethan suggested that in addition to the deans, the associate deans of graduate undergraduate studies should also be informed to help spread the word. Alex Pearson suggested a modification to the description of the second session, which Aaron agreed to incorporate. Aaron planned to involve the IT department in the communication process and aimed to get the first email announcement sent out by the end of the following day. A web page would be created to list all of the sessions and should be regularly updated. So we've got a summary of the key things that are happening in this meeting and in the discussion. So what can we do to aid human coordination? Well, one is just taking the notes and building a new summary of them, a new representation of them is a super useful way. And in fact, we can go in and we can summarize it from all kinds of different perspectives. We could go and summarize it from a particular role, like act as this particular associate dean and summarize it, or act as somebody who's focused in the IT department and summarize it. And we could try to build different summaries that emphasize different aspects of the information to better communicate it to different roles. All kinds of interesting ways of using the LLM to help us support the human communication and coordination. Now I'm going to show you where we start really getting powerful. I'm going to say list any potential ambiguities in the plan that the team should address. Now, the team as a whole has put together and had this discussion. Maybe some of the team was, checked out during a Zoom call. Maybe some of the team didn't hear something important, or maybe the team as a whole didn't think through all of the things that were being discussed and the details that were going to have to be known in order to make it concrete. So let's just go and ask, this human team is coordinating on a task. Where are ambiguities in their current plan? And so we get a number of really important things. One, the exact number of registrations for the July workshop is not provided in the transcript. This information is critical for planning and logistics. The specifics of the faculty AI communications John is drafting are not clear, such as what the communication will entail, who it will be sent to, and what its main goals are. Again, that's a really interesting one. There is no clear deadline for when John should provide his draft for review. That's a really important thing. Maybe we should address that. The communication plan for the training sessions is not fully detailed. Okay, we've got that. There's no mention of how participants will register for the sessions, which is important for tracking attendance and planning purposes. It's unclear who is responsible for updating the web page listing all the sessions or how often these updates will occur. So you can imagine, even at the end of a meeting session, like let's just take 15 minutes and before we adjourn, let's go look for ambiguities. And then you end up with all these interesting tasks that before you adjourn, you now go and quickly figure out how do we address these things. Or maybe some of them you already know the answer to, but it gives you a second set of eyes or a third set of eyes or a 10th set of eyes, as many different sets of eyes from as many different perspectives as you want. Each individual participant could go and run this task and change their prompt, change their perspective to get different ambiguities out, and then prompt a discussion on what it is we need to go and follow up on before we leave this meeting. Now, let's go on to follow-up, right? Who should help address each of these ambiguities? Like maybe we walk out of here and we'll figure them out after we leave, but who should do it, right? How do we figure out that breakdown based on all these things? So we just ask who should follow up, and it proposes a possible breakdown. So you know the typical thing, right? We have all these things we need to do. Who's going to do what? Well, let's just start with ask the AI, and let's start doing allocation based on what was discussed and responsibilities and roles that it perceives. And maybe then we go and adjust, but it's not a bad starting point to get things going rather than the silence at an end of meeting of who's going to do what, right? Let's just say based on what's discussed. Okay, number of July registrations. Sam Gray, who was directly asked about this, should provide the information to Daniel Brown. John Burke, who is preparing the draft, should clarify these specifics with Rima Mistry. Rima Mistry, who initially requested the update, should set a clear deadline for John Burke. So we're starting to get human coordination sorted out here. It doesn't have to be done this way, but at least we can start the conversation between the human beings of who's going to do what and by when and get that figured out. And then we have the second university. Notice it's multiplexing and understanding not just who's involved, but who's involved at what university. So we have communication plan for the training sessions with Alan Nash. Aaron Nash should propose a method and timeline for collecting and incorporating feedback in consultation with Sarah Freeman and Kenneth Ethan. All this great stuff, and all we did was just go and say, hey, give me the breakdown. Like, it's great for analyzing human communication, helping us to plan, be more effective in thinking through what we're doing. Now, let's also think about this. What else could we do with this in terms of human communication and coordination? Well, if you're anything like me, you've been on a project where there were multiple teams. This is a classic problem in software engineering. You have multiple teams that are meeting and making decisions, and late in the game, you realize two teams made conflicting decisions. And so how do we help identify conflicts earlier? Well, let's just take the meeting notes. So I've got the meeting notes here that I've prepared for a second team, and these meeting notes have a conflict or one or more conflicts, potential conflicts. Maybe they don't end up being a conflict, but because of ambiguities and the way things have been done and discussed, there's actually some conflicts in here. So I say, a second team working on logistics for the workshops just met. These are their meeting notes. Please point out any potential conflicts and decisions made by this team and the other team. And that actually should have been other teams, but I've got a meeting notes for one of the universities. And it says the meeting notes from the second team, logistics team, reveal several potential conflicts with decisions made by the first team, Aaron Nash's team. So we could go back up here and we could look, we can see Aaron Nash is at University XYZ. Here's Aaron Nash. And now we've got some specific issues. So it's identified within which university and which people have particular pitch teams that potentially have got conflicts. So now we see venue size and layout. The logistics team suggests using the university's main auditorium for the sessions, which conflicts with the initial plan to conduct the sessions in a smaller setting, presumably in conference room B. So now we've got a conflict of some kind, and we could go follow up on that. Now let's imagine for a second that the LLM made a mistake. And let's just follow up on this. Let's assume that conference room B doesn't even exist. Like, let's just say it hallucinated that. What's the harm done in this? Probably zero, because at the very minimum, if we send this and we say, hey, logistics team and Aaron Nash, hey, there's this potential conflict on venue size and layout. You know, logistics team said main auditorium, and the second team, and Aaron Nash's team said conference room B. And let's say conference B doesn't exist. Well, Aaron Nash could say, hey, we didn't say conference room B, we don't care, right? And but the main auditorium sounds great. Or they might say the main auditorium sounds terrible. But at least it identified this important point of coordination and required both teams to come back together. So even if there is a hallucination there at that moment saying, hey, there's a potential conflict, it requires both to look at it and say, is that an issue or not? Now, if we just say, tell me what the other team said, and we summarize what the other team did, now maybe there's an issue if it hallucinates conference room B. But if we're starting to tell them, like, here's what you said, and it conflicts, both teams are going to put a set of eyes on it and check it. And so it's forcing points of coordination when it gets interesting. So when you're working through things, you want to think ways of bringing people together and getting second sets of eyes. And this would be a great example. If they completely miss on venue size and layout, that's a problem. IT requirements. Logistics team's list of necessary equipment includes high-resolution projector, multiple wireless microphones, a good sound system, and several laptops. This contradicts with the initial team's IT requirements, which were likely based on a smaller room setup. So it's saying, hey, look, like if they set a smaller room and your IT requirements are like multiple wireless microphones, like it's kind of noticing this mismatch, but there's not a direct discussion of what that means in the first meeting, but it's kind of recognizing smaller room likely means different IT requirements. Session times, there's a scheduling conflict with the main auditorium for the second day of training, which means the training session's timing would need to be adjusted. This would conflict with the first team's plan as they have already drafted a schedule. So lots of potential here. We just need to think about how do we engage the LLM in getting humans to talk and coordinate. And this is kind of a great example of something that's good, because the goal is to get humans looking at the discussions. It's to get them to talk to each other more. So how do you use this effectively? Number one, help use it as a tool to spur human communication, to spur different ideas. If we go and look at the beginning, we said, okay, here's a summary. Well, one way to use a summary that's maybe not the best, it might be good, it might work, is if we could do a lot of work to try to get it to generate a really accurate summary and make sure that its summary referenced back to things that we could go and check in the original meeting notes. And that's one way to do it. Now, another way to do it instead would be to instead generate the summary at the end of the meeting, take a couple minutes and have everybody read it or read it out loud and say, is it accurate? And yes, then you go and use that summary or provide it. Or it gets everybody on the same page potentially. Like, do something to help make sure that it's accurate. Or send it out to everybody at the end and say, here's the summary. Does this capture everything accurately? Like, engage humans in the checking process, because it'll also have them rethink everything that's in there and hopefully do a better job. Now, we don't want to overwhelm, so we have to think about how to do this intentionally. But the key is we want people engaged, and we want to use it as a tool to help them engage. List any potential ambiguities. This is a great one. Again, we're going to have it sort of say what could be ambiguous or what's being missed. You know, that would be another great one. And then take the group as a whole and have them look at it. You know, use the time more productively by, you know, maybe even, using this, having everybody do their work ahead of time, give it all the documents, all the materials ahead of time. Let's start with, here's all the documents for our meeting. Where are the ambiguities in our plan? Where are the ambiguities in what we discussed last time? Start it off at the beginning of the meeting, and then help figure out who should do what or how. And there's all kinds of different ways you could do this by phrasing who's doing what. From a role perspective, you could also look at burdens and think of different ways of allocating, but it also helps get people thinking like, is that the right person to be doing that? Am I overburdened? It at least gets the conversations going. It also helps getting this aspect of, who should be coordinating with who. So when we see number of July workshops and registrations, now we also see Sam Gray, who was directly asked about this, should provide the information to Daniel Brown. We're getting more specific about who's going to coordinate and how. Very, very helpful. And then we can also do this across teams. Wherever we have multiple notes, like things, we want to make sure things don't fall through the crack because people aren't talking. So let's bring together multiple meeting notes. If you take Code Interpreter, you can bring together meeting notes, PDFs, all kinds of documents from different teams, explain which teams are producing what, and let's start doing these analyses to try to catch mistakes that are being made, conflicts, other issues, and coordination so that we can be better and more effective overall as human beings in accomplishing some problem together or solving some problem together. Hopefully we don't accomplish problems. Hopefully we solve problems. So hopefully we'll be better at solving problems in teams by using these tools effectively to help us coordinate.